Hello, I'm very happy to have you also by hearing and seeing this video. It is an honor to me that you are interested in the spiritual high school which was given by Rudolf Steiner. Like you know, it was done 1924. And Rudolf Steiner has given it in German, so it is in translation. And I will today read the most of it. It is the lesson number 3. And like I already told you the last time, it is something what we really can call an worship to God. It is a kind of Christian Michaelish Michael worship, and it is given by Rudolf Steiner from the Archangel Michael. You know, we are now living in something what we call a turning time, a world turning time for the human being. The time has ended where the human being is getting deeper and deeper into the material world, and now it is on us to recognize that this time is and turn around and try to find our way, find our rightful way back to the spiritual time, the spiritual world. And there are a lot of ways to get into the spiritual world. And now we're living in the age of Michael. And in the age of Michael, this what was given by Rudolf Steiner is what we really can call an Rosenkreuzer rightful way to the spiritual world. And what you can find in the work of Rudolf Steiner is a lot of explanation and a lot of lessons to understand who we are as a human being, that we are a spirit, we have an I, we have a soul, and we have a physical body. And we are as an I and a soul incarnated on earth, and we will live here from the birth to the death, and then we will live after the death in the spiritual world, going through the Kamaloka, going through a time with the high angel hierarchies to work on our next incarnation on earth. And to recognize this is that we can decide, every one of us on his own, that he wants to go away, a rightful way to the spiritual world. And what we have got here is a really large help for this. And you know, when you can see in what's going on in the world now is that a lot of the human beings still think they have to run everything in a material way, which makes a lot of big troubles. And would be very helpful for us to get some help from the high good gods. And these lessons also give us the possibility to come into a good and rightful connection with the good gods. And if we have our problems and we're working and meditate on these mantras, there will be also a time coming for us that we get answers, solutions, what we can do to solve the problems and find a rightful way for a new spiritual human being, a new spiritual mankind on earth to do recreate our kind of social organisms, which should be done in a new way, in a new way of brotherhood and economy, and love your neighbor in the economy organism, to get the right way in the justice and the state area, to find a way to have really the equality between the human beings, and in the spiritual area to get freedom of speech, of thinking, of religion, of arts, of education. Then this is a threefold organism which can solve, or would have the possibility to solve a lot of problems and bring us a lot of very beautiful new things in the world. So how I want to start again is to bring us in a mood of devotion through the gods in a quiet but very concentrated consciousness, to be in a mood of doing a meditation to these mantras. And I will start with the end part of the foundation stone from Rudolf Steiner. In the turn of time, occurred in the world spirit light, into the earthly stream of beings. Night darkness had ended its prevail. The brightest light streamed into human souls, light that warms the poor shepherd hearts, light that enlightens the wise kings' heads. Divine light, Christ Sun, warm our hearts, enlighten our heads, so that good will be what we through our hearts rise, what we through our heads purposefully want to lead. And in the beginning of the lesson 3, I will start with the first board, what you can later on find in the 9th lesson. O man, know yourself. So resounds the world word. You hear it soul powerful. You feel its spirit vastness. Who speaks so word vastly? Who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space distant radiation? In your senses being experience? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the world, feeling for aim, sensing in space's emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking losing in the time-destroying stream. Lesson 3. Let us begin, my dear friends, with the words of the Guardian speaks, words we already know when pointing in the direction of the spiritual world, which characterize what the human being can feel on the threshold of the spiritual world as he strides past the guardian. From the far reaches of space beings who experience existence in light, from the stages of the curse of time, which finds expression in creating, from the depth of heart-felt feeling, here in the self the world is Theosophic. There resound in the speech of soul, there enlightened by spiritual thoughts, that from divine healing powers, in the world shaping powers, the undulating existential words, O man, know yourself. It's about the path one should follow in thought, the path which one will actually take when seeking access to the spiritual world. And we should not say that when someone experiences in thoughts, if he honestly and earnestly lives in his thoughts, what the person in process of initiation realizes in reality by entering the spiritual world, that the former does not actually participate in what is revealed to the human soul when entering the spiritual world, because it is only a reflected ideation. One should not say, let's leave gaining entrance into the spiritual world to those who are striving to the initiation and stand with their souls in the spiritual world as people stand in physical existence with their senses. Rather should one say, when even in thought one approaches the description of the path that leads to the spiritual world, and provided the thinking is not superficial, he will experience and feel fully what it means to leave the world of the senses behind, a world only the intellect can grasp, and enter the spiritual world. That is what I will speak to you about today, my dear friends, and not merely for those who already seek the transformation which will lead them into the spiritual world, but also for those who at first only experience the transformation in their thoughts, and that includes all of you, else you wouldn't be sitting here. Therefore, the following must be said. When man makes his observations in the world of senses, life consists of such observations. When man uses the things that he encounters in the sense world to unfold his will. When he proceeds from observation to action, and when he lets the combination of such observations and actions have an effect on his feeling, he stands to a certain extent on firm ground, for the process has been implanted in him as a physical being on earth between birth and death. Wherever he doesn't have this firm ground, he looks for it. When he is expected to believe something, he looks everywhere for the facts behind it. He asks, what experience proves this or that? He does not like to accept something in ordinary life which is not proven by this or that outward experience. He stands on firm ground because he says to himself, what is true is what is seen. What is real is what is held in the hand. The world order itself, provides a certain security in human life. And because of this security, man differentiates insofar as it is necessary for ordinary life between birth and death. He differences between truth and illusion, truth and semblance, truth and dream. When verification cannot be found, he calls it semblance, and only by differentiating between true and false, reality and semblance, is life secure. Just imagine, my dear friends, that you were to go through life between birth and death is a way that you could never really know whether something that confronts you in truth or illusion. You could not determine whether a person who stands before you and speaks to you is a real person or the semblance of one. You could not differentiate between something happening to you being real or merely a dream. Just imagine this insecurity, what terrible insecurity that will cause in your life. Exactly as you would feel it if life were to withdraw the possibility of knowing whether you were dreaming or confronting reality, is also the way the adept feels standing at the threshold of the spiritual world. That is the very first important experience he has when he realizes that on the other side of the threshold is the spiritual world. As we have already seen, only darkness streams at first from the spiritual world, yet although here or there brilliant flashes of light emanate from the darkness, in which the guardians of the threshold's words are heard, as we learned last time. With all the knowledge of the senses and reason you may have gleaned in this physical world, you would never be able to know whether a real spiritual being a real spiritual fact stands before you, or a shape in a dream. That is the first experience of the spiritual world, that semblance and reality are mixed and merged up, and to differentiate between semblance and reality is problematic at first. That is something which should be borne in mind, especially by those who have experienced impressions from the spiritual world, not through normal spiritual training, but due to elementary forces, which can be the result of any number of things, such as shattering events, illness, and the like. He should not deceive himself by saying, well, now you have the spiritual world, because it could well be that whether it is that seems to suddenly shine from out of the spiritual world is merely an illusion. Therefore, the first thing one must learn in order to enter into the spiritual world is the ability to distinguish between truth and error, between reality and illusion. Independent of what is experienced in the physical world, one must acquire completely new capacities for distinguishing between reality and illusion. In our time, when people no longer pay much attention to how the spiritual world illuminates life, in which they only pay attention to what is palpable, to what can only be seen by physical eyes. In our time, when people are completely attended to the offered security which life between birth and death provides, in these times it is especially difficult to acquire this capacity to distinguish between truth and error, reality and semblance in respect to the spiritual world. It is in this area where the most earnestness is required. And where does this come from? You see, when you confront the outer world as a physical person, you think about this outer world, and at the same time you have impressions from the physical world, which in a certain sense slip under your thoughts, supporting them. You don't have to do very much in order to live in reality. Reality accepts you as a physical reality. It is quite different in the spiritual world. You must first grow into the spiritual world. For the spiritual world you must acquire the correct feeling of your own true reality. Then you will gradually be able to differentiate between truth and error, between reality and semblance of reality. When you sit down on a chair, at the moment you don't fall on the floor, but are able to sit safely on the chair, you know that in the physical world the chair is real. Chair and not merely an imagined chair. The chair itself provides proofs of its reality. That is not the case in the spiritual world. For why is it so in the physical world? Because in the physical world, your thinking, your feeling, your willing are held together by the physical body. You are a threefold human being, a thinking, feeling and a willing human being, but they are all unified within each other by the physical body. At the moment when the human being enters the spiritual world, he immediately becomes a triple being. His thinking goes its own way. His feeling goes its own way. His willing goes its own way. Though you can think in the spiritual world, have thoughts which have nothing to do with your willing, but these thoughts are illusion. You can have feelings which have nothing to do with your willing, but this feeling contributes to your undoing, not to your advancement. That is the essential thing, that when a person approaches the threshold of the spiritual world, it seems to him that the thinking flies out into distant space and that his feeling goes beyond his memory. Consider for a moment what I just said. You see, memory is really something which comes very close to the threshold of the spiritual world. Let's say you experienced something 10 years ago, it returns in memory. The experience is there again. You are justifiable, satisfied as far as the physical world it is concerned, if you have a vivid memory of it. For someone who has entered the spiritual world, however it is a stuff, he pushes through the memory. As tough he goes farther than the memory reaches. In any case, he goes farther back than his memory of physical earthly life can reach. He goes back beyond birth. And when one enters the spiritual world, he immediately senses that his feeling does not stay with him. Thinking at least goes out into the presently existing universe. It disperses, as it were, in cosmic space. Feeling goes out of the universe, and if one wants to follow feeling, one must ask, where are you now? When you have become 50 years old, then you have gone back in time farther than 50 years. You have gone back 70 years, 100 years, 150 years. Feeling leads you completely out of the time in which you have lived since childhood. And willing, if you take it seriously, leads you ever farther back in time, back to your previous earth life. That is something which happens immediately, dear friends. When you really come to the threshold of the spiritual world, the physical body ceases holding you together. One no longer feels within the confines of the skin, one feels slipped into parts. You feel as though your thoughts, which are previously confined by feelings, are streaming out into cosmic space and becoming cosmic thoughts. Your feelings seems to go back in time in the spiritual world between your last death and your present earth life, and with your volition you feel yourself in your previous earth life. It is just this splitting of the human being. Rudolf Steiner described it in his book How to Attain Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, which causes difficulties upon entering the spiritual world because of your thoughts expand. They had previously been held together and now stream out into cosmic space. At the same time, they become almost imperceptible, so one must equivalve the ability to perceive the thoughts which have thus expanded. Feeling is no longer permeated by thoughts, for the thoughts have gone, so to speak. So your feeling can only turn prayerfully, with reverence and devotion, to the beings with whom you pass your life between death and a new birth on earth. This is possible if one has cultivated thus reverence for the spiritual world in life. But the moment one volition which wants to proceed to previous earth lives takes over, the person meets a great difficulty in that he feels an enormous attraction for the contents of the lower nature. And here works most strongly what I previously said about the difficulty in being able to differentiate between semblance and reality. For the person acquires a strong preference for semblance. I'll describe it as follows. When a person begins to meditate, when he or she is really dedicated to the meditation, he would like to continue in tranquility. He does not want it to deprive him of life's confronts. Well, this desire not to be deprived on life's confronts is a strong producer of illusions and semblances. Because when you dedicate yourself completely to meditation, necessarily from the depth of your soul the questions arises about your capacity for evil. One cannot do otherwise than to feel through meditation, through that penetration into the depth of everything you are capable of penetrating, but the urge to deny this is so strong that one submits to the illusion that one is essentially a very good person. The real experience of meditation does not indicate such a result. It shows how one can be full of all kinds of variety and overestimation of oneself and underestimation of others. Also, one judges people not only because they have something important to say, but because one wishes to bask in the good opinion of others. But that is the least of things. He who really meditates honestly will see what drives life in his soul and what he is therefore capable of. Man's lower nature appears strongly before the soul's inner vision, and this honesty must exist in meditation. When it is there, we can see what the will's disposition really is, which is reflected in the words we have already heard. Behold the first beast, the crooked back, the bony head, the scrawny body. His skin is all a dullish blue. Your fear of creative spiritual being begat the monster in your will. Knowledge bravery alone will overcome it. Because the human being tends to succumb the illusion, he suppresses the impression that necessarily arises in meditation, and he feels the urge to mock the spiritual world. Only by honestly facing these opposing forces can he stand in the spiritual world in the right way. Then the sight of the second beast appears on the threshold. Behold the second beast, it bars, its teeth in a warped face, scornfully it lies. Yellow with grey spots is its body. Your hate of spiritual revelation begat this weakling in your feeling. Your fire for knowledge must tame him. And then when we are helpless in follow the thoughts we had in our heads during Earth's life, and are now cosmic thoughts because of this inability to bestride our cosmic thoughts, that in the third beast appears. Behold the third beast with cloven muzzle. Its eye is glassy, bostrous, sludging, dirty red. Its form appears to you. Your doubts in spirit light violence beget this ghost within your thinking. Your knowledge creation must make it yield. The less we succumb to illusions about this Trinity, which reflects our own being, the more we find in us the true human who can receive the light from the spiritual world, and who is in a position to really solve the riddle insofar as it is possible on earth to do so, which is conceded to us with the words, "O man, know yourself." For thought, this self-knowledge streams forth the true knowledge of the world which can lead us in the right way through life. Therefore, this threefold splitting in which one's thinking goes its way, feeling goes its way, willing goes its way, which otherwise are united by exterior forces, may be expressed by the words of the guardian of the threshold, says to the adept, "We heard them the last time." The third beast's glassy eye is the evil counter-image of thinking that inside yourself denies itself and chooses death, refusing the spirit power who it before his earthly life spiritually keeping alive in fields of spirit. The second beast's mockery face. It is the evil counter-force of feeling that our own soul hollows out and emptiness of life creates instead of spiritual content, which was enlightened before earthly being through the sun, spiritual power for the soul. The first beast's bony spirit. It is the evil creative power of the will which your own body estranges your soul's inherent strength and consecrate it to the counter forces who would world being, the God being, want to steal in future time. These are the words spoken by the guardian as a warning, so that we know who we should not enter, how we should not enter the spiritual world. Upon entering the spiritual world, we must have become accustomed to a different way of judging, a different way of feeling, and a different way of willing from what prevails in the physical world. And for that it is really necessary that we grasp this threefold element with us, that we firmly direct our gaze within in order to be alert to what our thinking really is, what our feeling really is, what our willing really is, and what they must become for us to be able to step across the threshold into the spiritual world, if only our thoughts, for the fact is that the gods place willpower before the bliss of knowledge and they require it. Therefore, directly after the guardian has spoken this discouraging, perhaps frightening words, he continues with the other words which tell us what we should do. At the point, the first lessons of the class also become practical in that they instruct us what should enter into our thinking, feeling and willing forces in order to enter the spiritual world in a right way. And the first should also be threefold, which should flow into us in a way that we can live with it. For in living with it, we are setting out on the path to the spiritual world. In the same way that we eat and drink, that we see and hear, must something be evoked in us by what the guardian of the threshold, standing before the spiritual world, says with earnest visage. See in yourself the thoughts weaving, world semblances you are experiencing. Selfhood being hides from you. Dive under into the semblance. Ether being flows in you. Selfhood being, it shall revere. Your spirit guide being. Let us examine this verse. When the human being lives in the sense world between birth and death, he feels to be within his physical body. He knows that his legs carry him through the world. He knows that blood circulation gives him life. He knows that his breathing awakens life. He commits himself to this breathing, blood circulation, and the movement of the members that carry him through the world. In doing so, he is a physical being on the earth, just as he commits himself to these things physically. He must also commit with his soul to the leading powers of the spiritual world. If he wants to participate in it, knowledgeably enter into it. Just as I must say that for physical health, your blood must circulate in the correct way. Your breathing must be in order. I must also advise a person who wishes to stand correctly in the spiritual world that his soul must follow, by sustained and led by his own spiritual guide. And the first part of the first verse, beginning at the last words, will be written to a board. Your spirit guide being. But my dear friends, you are committed to your blood by the force of nature, as you are to the movement of your limbs, also your breathing. But you cannot be committed in this way to your spirit guiding, being in the spiritual world. Inner activity is required. You don't reach them as you equivy breathing by movement of the lungs. You read them, however, by learning to revere them. Over the first sentence is written on the board, revere. Revere with what is deepest in you, with your selfhood being. Selfhood being is written in the same line as revere. Selfhood being. Selfhood being, it shall revere your spirit guide being. Thus you have the manner in which you must stand within the world, spiritual world, given in the words spoken by the guardians of the threshold. And how do you stand within? Not as though you were standing with your legs on solid ground, not through the warmth of your blood in physical life, not by drawing breath. You stand there with virtue of feeling yourself in the half-spiritual, etheric essence flowing through you. On the board is written, ether being flows in you. The feeling is as thought, one where a small cloud around with which a spiritual wind blows. That one is carried by the wind in which selfhood, one's own I, reverse the spiritual guides which approach with the wind from all sides. We are invited to submerge into it. But what is it initially? As long as we remain in our meditation in what I have just described, it is mere semblance. We must submerge in this semblance fully conscious that the wind and the reverence for the spiritual guide is only semblance. And now the fourth line on the board, dive under into the semblance. Why should we do all this? Well, in earth's life initially we have only a vague sense of our I, selfhood being. We define it with the word I, but in reality it is an undefined, dim, hidden feeling. And on the board the fifth line, selfhood being hides from you. We don't know much about, and what we do know is not cosmic being, it is cosmic semblance. It is world semblance. The sixth line is written on the board. World semblance you are experiencing. When we follow the guardian of the thresholds indicates. The seventh line is written on the board. See in yourself the thoughts weaving. In all become the weaving in our own thoughts. Now we have the first mantric verse, which can give us the strength in our thinking to accept the challenge with our selfhood, which can initially be expressed in the words. See in yourself the truth weaving, world semblance you are experiencing. Selfhood being hides from you. Dive under into the semblances. Ether being flows in you. Selfhood being is shall revere. Your spirit guide being. This is the invitation to us when observing our thoughts in retrospection. If you close yourself off from the outside world and observe how your thoughts fluctuate, and then you follow the invitation in these 7 lines, you have complied with the guardian of the threshold's first demand. Now you are to approach what the guardian says to your feeling. To hear within the flow of feeling, when semblance and reality merge each other. Your selfhood tilts to the semblance. So dive unto semblance being, and words, souls, forces are in thee. The selfhood it should well consider your own soul's life powers. Just as through the first mantric verse we enter thinking, we enter the inner world of thinking through the second, of feeling through the second. The second verse is written on the board. To hear within the flow of feeling. Put aside thinking and try to observe your own feelings. In thinking everything is semblance, but when we descend into feeling semblance and being blend, intermix, that is immediately apparent. When semblance and reality merge each other, only our I, selfhood, does not wish to enter real existence. It is used to outside semblance and appearance. It tends towards semblance, still retaining this from the world of the senses. Your selfhood tilts to the semblance. So dive into semblancing being. In what results from feeling, it is seemingly being a mixture of semblance and reality. So dive into semblance being when we will feel the mood which lies in these 4 lines. We will realize that it has become serious as we dive into the semblance. And worlds, souls, forces are in thee. First of all, selfhood being had to revere by thinking into thoughts. Now selfhood should consider the thoughts are to be brought into feeling. We then encounter something which assures us to the true being. The selfhood it should well consider. your own soul's life powers. No longer semblance but life powers. Whereas ourself, our tends toward semblance, the gods give us the rock of being in the depth of feeling. In order to convert the verse into mantram, it would be good to revisit such correspondences. Reverse. Consider, in the third verse we will see how it increases. Semblance, our experience. Here in the first verse it's only semblance, and here in the second verse, semblance and reality within your blend. Guide, in the first verse, your own. Life powers, in the second verse. The beings who guide us through the ether, the life powers, who guide us back in the pre-earthly existence, where feeling goes. If you wish to make it into a true mantram, however, you must make something else into consideration. Read the first verse. See in yourself the thoughts weaving, world semblance you are experiencing. Selfhood being hides from you. Dive under into the semblance. Either being flows in you. Selfhood being, it shall revere your spirit guide be. Clearly this is a Tochaic written, which I beg you to observe, if you stress this strongly and this weakly. It corresponds to the correct etheric movement in the soul, where reverence for the higher beings requires such a tone. Thus you will be led into the spiritual world. It is otherwise in the second verse. To hear within the follow of feeling, when semblance and reality merge each other, your selfhood tilts to the semblance. So dive into semblancing being, and world's soul's forces are in thee. The selfhood it should well consider, your own soul's life powers. The way in which the soul feels this world's either Tochaic or lambic. Here there is a distinctly Tochaic beat, and here is a distinctly yambic beat. Gives the soul this corresponding worth. It is not a question of merely acquiring intellectual information, even when the soul is making its way to the spiritual world, only in the thought. Rather is it important that the soul enters with the right breathing and rhythm of cosmic being. If you use a yambic rhythm in striving to enter cosmic thought, You have misunderstood the guardian of threshold. If you use a trochaic verse and not the iambic one to entrance into the world of cosmic feeling, again, you have misunderstood the guardian of threshold. The third element we must plunge into is willing, and the guardian of threshold also gives us a verse to this. Now that we have contemplated the first two, the last one will be easy to understand. The third verse will be written abroad. Let prevail in us, in you, the will's trust, which rises out from all semblance being, with own being creating rises up. It surges up from the will to what gives the self-substance content. Turning to him all your life, which is filled with world spirit power, your own being it should grasp, world creative power in the spirit eye. Feel again the escalation, reverse. One is far away, one looks up, one reverses from without. Consider. One draws closer in thought, one enters. Grasp. The highest escalation, one enters and grasps it. Guide beings. Life powers. Now. World creative power. Now at the beginning of the line corresponding to the reality of the direct power of the will. You will feel that all three are mantric verses if you pay attention to the trochaic element here in the first verse, the iambic here in the second verse, and here, however, in the third verse, we have two stressed syllables. Let prevail in you the will's trust, which rises out from all semblance being, with own being creating rises up, turning to him all your life, which is filled with world spirit power, your own being it should grasp, world creative power in the spirit eye. This is what must be observed. You must realize yourself from the mirror intellectually content and attend to the trochee, iambic and spondi rhythms. At the moment we are able to move on from the intellectually meaning to the commitment to the rhythm. From the moment it is possible to leave the physical world and really enter the spiritual one. For the spiritual cannot be grasped only using the words whose meanings apply to the physical world, but only if we use the opportunity to carry the rhythms of these words out to the living cosmos. Therefore self-observation is exercised on the soul in a threefold sequence of thinking, feeling and willing. The soul will then express itself correctly if it experiences this as it does eating and drinking by the body, as it experiences blood circulation and breathing, if it experiences the written in these words. See in yourself the thoughts, weavings, world semblance you are experiencing. Selfhood being hides from you. Dive under into the semblance. Either being flows in you. Selfhood being, it shall revere your spirit guided being. To hear within the flow of feeling, when semblance and reality merge each other, your selfhood tilts to the semblance, so dive into semblancing being, and worlds, soul's forces are in thee. The selfhood it should well consider, our own soul's life powers. Let prevail in you the will's thrust, which rises out from our semblance being, with own being creating, rising up. Turn to him all your life, which is filled with world spirit power. Your own being it should grasp, world creative power in the spirit eye. In words you have first the blood with the corresponding rhythms. You have the circulating blood. Seek the sense of these rhythms. Let them act in your soul, and you will come near to the guardian's first warning, which I told you at the beginning of these lessons, my dear friends. Where on earthly ground, color on color, life is manifesting creation, where from earthly matter, form on form, the lifeless is given shape, where sentient beings strong in will, warms himself in joy of existence, where you, O man, your bodily being, derived from earth and air and light. There your true being enters, deep, night enveloped, cold darkness. You ask in the dark sweeping expanse, no longer who you are, and were and will be. For your own being the day grows dimly, to the soul's night, to spirit darkness, and you turn with angst of soul toward the light that from darkness streams. And if we wish to find the light that emerges from the darkness, we will find it if we seek it by the threefold path, filling ourselves with this life blood for the soul that wishes to tread the path to true knowledge of the Spirit and of God. I will at the end also say the first word. O man, know yourself. So resounds the world word. You hear its soul powerful. You feel its spirit vastness. Who speaks so world vastly? Who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space, distant radiation, in your senses being experience? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the world, feeling foreign, sensing in space's emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking, losing in the time destroying stream. Thank you very much.